Democrats, America is a republic, not a democracy. Fact check. True.
And then you've got this guy, Mehdi Hasan, who actually comes by way of the UK. He was an MSNBC anchor, and now he's just basically a troublemaker and a provocateur. Play cut 212.
I think that if you can play church bells, you can pray the call to prayer. We are as American as anyone else, and don't take any BS from anyone.
Okay, so this is going to be their argument now, as the population of Muslims increases in the country, while we continue to issue 1.2 million green cards every year, and a lot of those are coming from Muslim countries. And now, even increasingly, if we get people immigrating from Europe, they might be Muslims. So the point is, they're going to assert their religious freedoms, because this is a country historically that has exercised a broad view of what religious freedom is. But you're saying there's a historical precedent. So I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit here, which is a terrible expression, by the way, to use in a religious freedom discussion. But so if they come in and they start saying, well, it's no different than church bells, and you come in and you say, well, it has to be consistent with historic precedent. Is there a sense of, you would look at it and say, well, because this nation is historically Christian or Catholic, you would have broader freedoms in those respects to exercise certain religious freedoms than you would if they want to start doing Sharia law, if they want to start doing genital mutilation, if they want to start doing just Muslim call to prayer?
Yeah, I think it wouldn't be based upon the religion. It would be based on the practice. What kind of practices were allowed? So in other words, if a Christian can pray, somebody could say, well, the history was most of the prayers are Christians, so the Jews can't pray. Well, no. The whole idea was they were praying, right? And I think the situation here with calls to prayer, that's a noise issue, right? I mean, if the idea was that, well, we don't want them to be able to send an email to their friends and tell them to come to prayer. Well, we'll allow the Christians to do it, but not the Muslims. Well, we wouldn't say that, right? This is a noise issue. And if the noise is really violating and disturbing people, they need to control it with noise. Now, the things that people are really concerned about, like creating Sharia law and things like this, those would never be allowed or consistent with our Constitution in this country. So those things would take away freedoms. And those things, so you always have to ask yourself, what is the religious practice that they're asking for? And is it consistent with our history and tradition if the government is involved? If not, is it just something that is, we would want to protect for all faiths? Because that's really what the religious freedoms is about.
Yeah, I mean, in this Muslim call to prayer, when they start congregating in certain municipalities like they have in Dearborn, that's going to be an increasing issue, because that's something that they demand.
It will.
They demand these 5 times a day prayers. They all have to point towards Mecca, and they get on their prayer mats. And it's, and I think at some level for a lot of us, it's just simply, it's offensive because we believe that, and you don't have to chime in here. This can be me. But it's offensive because, we love our culture. We love the American Christian heritage that we have, that we inherited from England and from, the Magna Carta and, all the way back to Black Robe Regiment, the revivals that gave birth to American liberty. And we hold these things dear. And so we don't want to hear Muslim calls to prayer in our neighborhoods. I don't want my kids to have to go to school and be taught how to be respectful to this other culture that I didn't have to grow up with, but all of a sudden they decided to move here. And when you also think about the fact that they have 50 plus Muslim majority nations on planet Earth that they could move to, why are you insisting on moving to the West that is Christian? Even if we're not, everybody's, going to church on Sunday, this is in our turns of phrases, our rules, our norms, our customs, the holidays that we celebrate. This is a Christian nation. It still is. And we're seeing this great revival. We do not want to have to listen to the call of prayer. I understand you have a different challenge as a lawyer to sort of interpret the laws and the statutes on the books, but what are the statutes on the books, or what is lacking that would help protect and insulate our culture from, I would say, an increasingly hostile force that wants to assert cultural dominance on Americans and the West?
Yeah, I think the idea of what you can do about different religions that would come in and really aren't religions, they're more government and culture. They don't assimilate. That's problem number one. Any religion that comes into the United States that doesn't want to assimilate, that's the whole purpose of the United States is assimilation. It's the melting pot, not creating a new government from some other source. And so I think the issue there is not the religious freedom side, it's the immigration and who we're allowing in and making sure that we are the United States, that we have a certain history and tradition and approach, and we love diversity if they're coming here for the ideals of America, freedom. But I will say
we don't have a problem with ethnic diversity necessarily.
Right.
We have a problem with cultural diversity.
Right.
Now, it's not to say that I don't love my Italian grandmother's, cannolis. That's not what I'm saying. Like, obviously, there's certain things, but if you expect to come here into this country and you expect to then matriculate your son or daughter into my kid's school, and now we have to make a carve-out for Muslim prayer 5 times a day that impacts my child's learning experience, or they have to now be educated on how to be, incorporated into that experience, much like we've seen candidly with the secular cult of LGBTQ plus whatever, as Charlie always called the alphabet mafia. I mean, that was a coercive force. It still is in many schools, and you've had experience. Actually, I want to play one of these cuts from yours. I want to talk about that case, but this is a insidious cultural coercive force that we have to. Yes, the immigration is key, and I totally agree with that. We've been hitting that hard for a long time on the show. We're doing 1.2 million green cards a year, and we don't vet for American values. We don't vet for anything like that because we're a bunch of suckers and we get taken advantage of. And my argument is, like, can we at least as a first step go back to pre-1990 Immigration Act with George H.W. Bush, which took it from 500,000 green cards a year to 1.2 million. We do not need the state of Montana every year in this country, or the state of Arkansas every 3 years in this country with legal immigrants, especially as AI is coming. I mean, we're already seeing Amazon has just announced they're going to probably cut about 600,000 jobs and replace them with robots over the next couple of years. I mean, so this is coming. We do not need this level of immigration. But the cultural implications are unavoidable, right? And so I totally agree. Yes, let's deal with the immigration thing first. But we already have a problem that's here. And or at least a potential conflicts of interest that are here. And you see that with the Mehdi Hasan clip. So I'm just trying to drill down on this piece of, do we have more because we have more precedent historically? Do we have more freedoms? Do we have more rights to this than? Yeah.
There's going to be more practices that are more consistent with the Judeo-Christian heritage of the founding that are going to be laid in, that are not going to, that wouldn't be part of history tradition from other religions. They're not going to be, so they're not going to be automatically, presumptively. Now, again, what we're talking about here, though, is not practices of individuals. It's when you involve the government. That's what the whole issue with Coach Kennedy's case and this idea of you're not doing the lemon approach where, there's your own government grounds. Well, gosh, you can't do any of this religious stuff. Mm-hmm. They said, no, as long as it's part of our tradition. Now, I say all this, we're about to argue a case at the Supreme Court in less than 2 months over whether you have a right to share your faith in a public park. So you begin to wonder, sometimes we begin to lose who we are as a country. But I feel good, and I'm very hopeful we'll win that case. But so that's different. But let's go to religious freedom itself, not with on the government lawn or whatever else. I really believe that religious freedom wins out. It's kind of like free speech. If somebody's saying something you don't agree with, the answer is not for the government to stop the other. It's
more speech.
Let's speak the truth, right? And it's the same way with religious freedom. Especially as a Christian, I believe, man, you allow there to be freedom. I think that I have the truth and the Holy Spirit on my side, and you got no chance on the other side, right? So that's what I want. So that's one of the beautiful things about the Coach Kennedy case is all these things that we haven't been allowed to do that's created almost a naked public square, right? We should be, I love the fact that we can have a nativity scene at Christmas on the government lawn. We can have a menorah for Hanukkah. And we begin to remember those moral and religious roots of our country. And it's not this sort of naked public square like we're moving into Marxism or something. We actually have a different mindset that actually thinks there is truth. that is not about, the oppressed versus the oppressor. It's a very different. It's every person is valuable in the eyes of God. All those principles start to flood back into our country. But when we remove those from the public arena, we began to lose those. When you push the 10 Commandments in the closet and you do all these things, which is why I love, if you've seen, a number of states are now passing laws. They're putting up 10 Commandments posters in their schools, and they're teaching about these things as part of our history and traditions and the beginning of our laws and our thoughts in our country. That'll really change us, I think, long term. And I would much rather have that approach that allows for more freedom, even if there's some things that maybe people don't like. As long as they're not infringing other people's freedoms, they're welcome to go and live their lives.
I wonder if you could make the argument that the Muslim call to prayer 5 times a day is infringing on my freedom not to have to hear it. Although they would say the same thing about church bells, which is objectively a beautiful thing to hear. I mean, I would argue that even Muslims would think, oh, that's a nice sounding tone. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they just hear infidel.
I think they'll have to have neutral on that. I think they'll have to have a neutral law, whatever it is, right? If it's a noise level, if it's the number of times a day, something. I mean, there is a right somewhat. I mean, you would want to make that a right in your community to not be disrupted by sounds all day, right? I mean, it would be miserable if you were right next to one of these places and you couldn't do your business.
Of course. No,
right?
of course.
So, but those laws would have to be objective. It couldn't be, well, this religion can't do it and this religion
can't. I don't think that's going to be a very satisfying answer for somebody. I understand that you are bound by the laws and you have to work within a legal construct. So this is not pointed at you, Kelly. I understand you're kind of helping me navigate through what's possible, what's not. But I think you're right. I mean, ultimately, this is a cultural issue that starts with immigration.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're going to have to get to. Now, I want to pivot somewhat to this. So the president has formed a commission, a religious liberty commission.
Yes.
Tell us about that, because you are directly involved in that.
It's the first time it's ever been done in the United States. Commissions generally report to like an agency or department or something, and I think they send a report and it disappears in the back of some room. This one's really different. The charter of the commission is specifically to report directly and only to the President of the United States. And we have to do this by July 4th of our 250th, which is the 250th celebration of religious freedom and the freedom of our country.